E ora prenderà la parola per esporre la sua relazione il professor Dorsz dell'Università di Varsavia. Dorsz. Che illustrerà l'idea di nazione e di unità europea in Austria e
I am from Torun, from the University of Nicolaus Copernicus. It was a mistake in the program. And like everyone here, I feel grateful for the invitation to this conference. And I think that the problem which I want to present, the nation and the idea of European unity in Ortega y Gasset, can be very useful for every one of us, because the thinking of Ortega y Gasset gives us the possibility to look at the same problems but in the different light. José Ortega y Gasset was one of the most important Spanish thinkers from the time of Suarez to Schur. He was born in 1883, was died in 1955, and very often is called philosopher of Europe or philosopher of European unity. Because Europe and the project of the unification of Europe were in the center of his deliberation already in the early years of the 20th century. All the time, however, first, the real problem for Ortega was his country, Spain, and Europe, where, according to his words, all the sufferings of Spain begin and come to an end, seem to be only salvage for being in a dramatic situation after the colonial defeat. Ortega's homeland and the remedy for spiritual decay of its citizens. Over the time, however, Europe, which was supposed to be the solution, became to constitute the part of the problem itself, losing its vitality and experiencing the impotence of creating such a life program that could be accepted and treated as his own by every European. The expectation for a way out from such a deep crisis, diagnosed by the scholar in the most well-known of his works, The Revolt of the Masses, is associated with the unification of Europe, that is, replacing the nation-state by the state structures based on the European grounds. The aim of this research is critical presentation of the vision of the unification of the nation of Europe, described by a philosopher from Madrid, and existing mostly on the pages of his The Revolt of Masses. I think it is good to remember that the first edition of the Revolt of Masses was in 1930, more than 70 years ago. And also in the other writings from the time after the Second World War, which was published after the death of a philosopher under the common title Meditations on Europe. And the idea of unification of Europe itself was not the original Ortega's suggestion. His reflections go along with the very popular in the 20s of the previous century trend called Pan-Europeism, but the novelty and the way of presenting the problem by Ortega lies in the effort and manner of the philosophic justification of this undertaking. As it is emphasized by his disciple and continuator of philosophic program, Julian Marias, at the time of eruption of nationalisms, which competed with internationalism of Marxism, Ortega called in his The Revolt of the Masses for unification of Europe as the way of fulfilling the deepest vocation of the European nations. This appeal was ignored at that time, and the book did not bring the outcomes which might have been expected. People did not simply understand something that was the key message of this work and what constituted its culmination, the interpretation of the nation through the reference to its origin, the usage of the method of historical reason. The historical reason was for Ortega the new instrument, the new thought that could address itself to the fact that history was the real ground of our existence. In it, Ortega completed the real dialectic first proposed by Wilhelm Dilthey. The historical reason became for Ortega the dialectical method of the radical reality of human life. In historical reason, we have a description of how we emerge in time and how we invent our lives in circumstances. Previous thoughts have all ignored, forgotten, or repressed that historicality of human life. They have either treated human life through the methods and materials of natural science, or they have forgotten the biographical dimension of our existence as accumulation and auto-fabrication. But there is another dimension of historical reason that is crucial to Ortega's position, and this is the prediction of the forms of human life in the future. If historical reason is to be adequate to the understanding of human life in time, then it must in some sense address to the future. This future-oriented explanatory element Ortega understood as self-eternalization, the attempt of life to possess the future through foresight, prediction, or prophecy. Historical reason can become a sort of instrument that anticipates the possibilities of the future in conjunction with definite practices that would promote certain possibilities and exclude others. According to Ortega, we are responsible for the future in the sense that human life possesses in its development the power of self-alterability or auto-fabrication. The final phase of historical reason, then, is human autonomy with respect to the future and the anticipation of future circumstances. History is here seen as a system of relations between present and past actualities and future possibilities. It is the understanding of our life and time. And by using the method of historical reason, Ortega interprets a nation referring to the creation and the development of the modern nations. The factors commonly regarded as the ones constituting the nation, such language, religion, territorial community, according to Ortega, in the same moment of creation the nation, they are also obstacles in this process, and after they are very important, but in the process of consolidation of the nation, but no, not in the beginning. It is clear if we look at the definition of the nation by Ortega, which is very close to definition of Renan, that to be the nation is the everyday plebiscite. But there is one very important difference between Ortega's conception and the Renan's, because for Ortega the most important is future and not the past. The history is important, but we are above of all the project of life. We will look at this. When he described the nation in the process of the creation, he wrote, "As always happens, in this case a plain acceptance of facts gives us the key. What is that is clearly seen when we study the evolution of any modern nation, France, Spain, Germany? Simply this: what at one period seemed to constitute nationality appears to be then denied at a later date. First, the nation seems to be the tribe, and the no-nation the tribe besides it. Then the nation is made up of the two tribes, later it is a region, and later still a county, a duchy, or a kingdom. The presence of the two principles is evident. One variable and continually superseded, tribe, region, duchy, kingdom, with its language or dialect. The other, permanent, which lives freely over all those boundaries and postulates as being in union precisely what the first considered as in radical opposition. And being the nation is not only being the tradition, the type of society existence consisting in being the one it actually is, That is why concentrated on the presence and from its nature non-problematic, making the reference to tradition and language which distinguish it from other social groups, is called the ethnic group, in Spanish the pueblo. What is characteristic for the nation, it is its future dimension. Ortega explains the difference between the ethnic group and the nation, referring to the difference between what a person is behind oneself and what he is ahead of oneself, between what a person is as tradition and what he is as a mission. The human as a mission is all that what he has in front of his eyes, because it constitutes his problem and project. He is all that engages and worries him, what he desires and what forces all his energy. In a word, all what he wants to be and what he must be. The second differentiation introduced by Ortega concerns being a man in the sense of a person or community as submissive being, oriented towards the traditional reception, and being a man in an active mode, taking up the problems. The ethnic group turn into the nation when vis ergo of the tradition turns suddenly into the model, into vis proiectiva, the power creating the future, the ideal life directed towards the future. The nation, in its submissive sense, is mother tongue, religious and heroic tradition, the system of customs, the special way of feeling and experiencing. Yet the most characteristic for the idea of the nation is the fact that all of these submissive forms of living developed and enriched step by step, till the moment of constituting a kind of holistic manner of being a man. To be an Englishman, French or Spanish means to be integrally a man in the English, French or Spanish manner. This manner concerns all the dimensions of man: religion, poetry, art, economy, politics, love, suffering, pleasure, penetrates, satisfies and shapes them. There is no absolute human left without these unique manners of being the man. So every European felt that his national style of being a man is not only a passive way of dragging the past, but something what should exist also in future, what deserves existing. And after comparing nation with Greek polis and Roman urbs, which constituted the societies already shaped, but the societies that had never become the nation, Ortega describes a nation as the society formed in depth. The social form of the nation, which in comparison with polis is also crowded and plural, characterized with a certain depth. Most of its reality is hidden for the members of the nation who believe in its invisible abilities. In this way, future-oriented dimension, mentioned before, is revealed, which in the case of polis is hardly noticeable. It has its basis in the difference of the origin of the polis and of the nation. The nation is not the settled down like a state or city. The nation is always behind our backs. It constitutes the reality hidden and invisible, and at the same time so obvious that the individual does not care for his own nation. The city is most of all the state, but for the nation, the state is only the top of the wide pyramid, formed and shaped by its other attributes. There are many nations which not turned into states. Our nationality makes us not co-citizens, but co-patriots. The nation is not us, but we are the nation, wrote Ortega. It is not us who created, it makes us itself, constitutes, gives us our primary substance. The city is the formation of the individuals, and in the nation the man is born, and also he takes part in its creation. At the last stage the nation is created by the history. And the nation came into being and lived due to certain definite aim, and the structure where they realize this aim is called the nation state. The nation state is born from the community of various ethnic groups, uniting them through one judicial system. At the same time, the impulse for creating the state is the project of the enterprise which size and scale go beyond the abilities of a small society based on the kinship. The state is always an invitation issued by one group of men to other human groups to carry out some enterprise in common. State and plan of existence, program of human activity or conduct, these are inseparable terms. Its reality is purely dynamic, something to be done, the community is in action, not what we were yesterday, but what we are going to be tomorrow, joins us together in the state, wrote Ortega. Okay, and he wrote his books in the time of a very strong crisis of Europe at the edge of 19th and 20th century. And this crisis has one of its sources in destroying the rule of democracy, the most important base of modern nation state. The social elite started to give in the influences of the masses. The peoples of the West got under the influence of different kinds of demagogues who led to the extreme all sorts of theories in order to gain the popularity of the masses. The national awareness, consolidating the social actions since the beginning of the nation states at the edge of the 16th and 17th century, was turned into a political program that was synonymous with the loss of authenticity. As Ortega writes, the political programs are never built out of authentic ideas, but they are only composed of isms. And vice versa, when something comes closer to the ism, it means that it is not the authentic thing, but it has been downgraded and turned into the program. And if Ortega was right, also the program of the constructing of the European unity, only like a political and economic program, it is the other ideology, and he wrote that this creation is only the very strange artifact of the politicians, but not real project of common life for every European. The national awareness has been developed into nationalism. It had its catastrophic results, especially as it has been successfully developed into hypernationalism. And hypernationalism is just one of the dimensions of the crisis connected with the achievement of the social power by the masses, which Ortega called the revolt of the masses. The revolt of masses became the most important consequence of radical demoralization of Europe and the loss of historical vitality.
Speak slowly.
Okay. The main problem and the main reason of the crisis, which I think it is not finished but continues for Ortega, is the demoralization of Europe and the loss of this European historical vitality. It means the loss of the common project of life. And for Ortega, it was only 2 times in the history of Europe where Europe had that project. The time of Christianity and after the Enlightenment. But for Ortega, the crisis we experience in our times does not mean that the vital strength of Western tradition expired. According to Ortega, the obstacle that makes the overpass of this crisis impossible is a disproportion between the possibilities of modern Europe as a whole and the narrowness of structures of a nation or a nation state. The real situation of Europe, he wrote in The Revolt of Masses, is as follows. Long and glorious history leads Europe to a new stadium of her development. In this phase, everything just became bigger. Simultaneously, the structures that are reminiscence of her former glory are too confined and became an impediment for her future development. Europe emerged as a set of small nations. National ideas and sentiments were in some sense one of the most characteristic European inventions. Now Europe is forced to overcome herself. The process of overcoming the crisis in which Europe is stuck demands that we resign from temporary solution and radically renew the fundament on which the Western societies are built. For Ortega, it means only one thing. It means that structures of nation-state has to be replaced by the structure of Europe as a whole. He finds the hope for an authentic cohabitation and coexistence in the eagerness for European unification. Europe, as Ortega emphasizes, does not constitute something imaginary. It is not even a vision which should be realized in the indefinite future. Europe has been something very real for ages. For the philosopher from Madrid, the notion of Europe is not only a geographical or geopolitical notion, but at the same time the concept in a sense sociological, cultural or spiritual. It describes the society existing since the times of the Roman Empire, which citizens had been living in two historical dimensions at the same time. The first of them was of a very detailed character but extremely vivid and strongly influencing. It was connected with a particular national awareness. The other dimension was determined by broadly understood community, which value system, customs and tradition had been being shaped since the time of ancient Greece and then was developed by the civilization of the Roman Empire and the culture which was formed on the territory of Europe by Christianity. Defining the society as the coexistence of the people in a certain system of traditions, which is structured by the law, public opinion and the power, Ortega stressed that Europe as the society leave behind the creation of European nations. The nations of the West were being formed quite slowly as the dense centers of socialization on the background of the wider European society, which as the social space had existed before them. The second form of social existence is different than the life of a nation that always was something obvious and conspicuous. The second form possessed from the very beginning more subtle and more difficult to realize character. It was something like a background of national life events. Ortega, such inclined to the use of metaphor and comparisons, states that it was always like a watermark on a paper. To find it, you have to look at it in a certain way. When you have problem to find this watermark, it does not mean that its presence is not obvious. The fact that some people permanently refuse this obviousness is a consequence that they are unable to find attributes of civil authority out of places that are commonly acknowledged as places of residence of these attributes, out of individual European nations. Meanwhile, once and forever we have to realize that from many centuries, and from 4 centuries with the knowledge of this fact, all European nations live subjected to civil authorities that to express their dynamic purity do not accept another name than this taken from mechanics, European balance of power. The unity of Europe is not a phantasm but a reality. Instead, the phantasm is something opposite, the assertion that France, Germany and Spain are independent substances. Absolute would lose 2/3 of its vital concerns. We can also forget about the left 1/3, that is, at least for Ortega, equally important. Unity does not mean for him uniformity because in reality, nation-like persons are intimacies. This attribute allows them, above all, and in any given situation have their own unique and unrepeatable character. Every nation preserves this unique character like an elevation above the level of something that can be called a level of a basic cohabitation, in other words, European reality. Summits of this elevation are diverse and far from each other, but the foundation are one and spread from the Iceland to Caucasus only. For Ortega, the vague idea of the world union of nations is just utopia. And I will finish with Ortega's words. He wrote that the European cannot live unless embarked upon some great unifying enterprise. When this is lacking, he becomes degraded, grows slack, his soul is paralyzed. The groups which up to today have been known as a nation arrived about a century ago at their highest point of expansion. Nothing more that can be done with them except lead them to a higher evolution. They are no mere past accumulating all around Europe, weighting it down, imprisoning it. With more vital freedom than ever, we feel that we cannot breathe the air within our nations, because it is a confined air. What was before a nation open to all the winds of heaven has turned into something provincial, an enclosed space. Everyone sees the need of a new principle of life. Only determination to construct a great nation from the group of peoples of the continent would give new life to the pulse of Europe. She would start to believe in herself again and automatically to make demands on the discipline herself. The crossing the borders of nationality means setting the European in face of the higher project which would fill his life. If the reason of European desocialization had been and is the fact that the European member lacks the principles of coexistence which would be in force and to which one could refer, then the project unifying Europe cannot refer exclusively to economy, but most of all it should have moral, cultural and spiritual character. Ortega finished his work, The Revolt of the Masses, with the question that he holds himself the great question. What are the radical defects from which modern European culture suffers? This question was left by him with no answer. And from the historical perspective of the last 3/4 of the century that have been passed since the publication of Spanish philosophers' works, we could say that such extreme subjection of the human being has not been possible in any of the existing civilization. The attack against human dignity. And maybe the defense of human dignity, it means the movement of the human rights, maybe constitutes a part of this project, common for every European, but we don't know. It is the question and ask for God and for Christianity. Ortega was agnostic. He left the church because he was convinced that the church was guilty of the decay of his nation and of Spain. And for him, Christianity, also like enlightenment, was the question of the past. And we should to look for something new which will be attractive for every European. But the Christianity is alive. And this is like our mission, to participate in constructing that or looking for this new project and thinking about the human rights and human dignity, like wrote Robert Spemann, the thesis on inviolability of human's dignity without the faith in God, what Ortega seemed to forget and what was strongly emphasized by this philosopher, is denounced as the present illusion, very often as the illusion being the obstacle on the way to ultimately tame society beyond freedom and dignity. If the human being is the highest creature only for himself, then there is no reason not kill those whose existence is of a minor importance for everyone except for themselves. There is no reason for the mankind not got to disappear. Horkheimer and Adorno grasped the logic of naturalistic relativism very well, writing that the only argument against the crime is definitely the religious argument. Without the idea of something what unconditioned and absolute, Europe is just the geographical concept. Let's add the name of the place where the elimination of the human being started. Thank you.